truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Friday, June 7th, 2024, the 1,234th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening to the podcast through a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. When you become a paid subscriber, you experience the ad-free version of the podcast. You get to join in the conversation over on Substack, and you are invited to participate in the interactive live streams every Wednesday afternoon. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month. And if you can't or you don't want to, continue listening to the podcast for free on a wide variety of podcast platforms, including, of course, Substack and Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin, and you feel better about precious metals. I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company, and that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. So as I think I mentioned yesterday, I was planning to cover the Russia war situation today, and I may still get to some of that toward the end of the podcast, but I kind of don't think so. I decided I want to take today's episode in a different direction, and I want to start with this article from Punchbowl News yesterday. This is Punchbowl's Jake Sherman. He's like the guy for on-the-ground Capitol Hill news coverage. So this is from yesterday, late afternoon. Turner blindsided by Johnson's intel appointments. Speaker Mike Johnson didn't tell House Intelligence Committee Chair Mike Turner, Republican of Ohio, that he was appointing two controversial House Republicans to the secretive panel, just one of the dynamics that is causing angst across the Capitol. Oh no, there's angst at the Capitol. Gosh, the American people should be very concerned. Turner learned that Johnson was tapping Reps Ronnie Jackson from Texas and Scott Perry from Pennsylvania from press reports, according to multiple sources familiar with the events. Johnson's decision to appoint two hardline Republicans to the committee is reverberating throughout the Hill. Several members of the committee, Republicans and Democrats, say they worry about the integrity of the panel in the wake of Johnson's appointment of the pair. So now they are scared that the House Intel Committee will not be able to handle things the way they needed things to be handled. They're not worried that those MAGA extremists, Perry and Jackson, are going to somehow compromise national security or sources and methods. They're worried that people from the other team are going to be in their special secretive committee. After years of intense partisan clashes during the Donald Trump era, members of the Intelligence Committee have tried to rebuild the reputation of the panel. In their view, Johnson's selection of Jackson and Perry betrays a lack of understanding about or respect for their work. And the indignity of allowing Turner to find out about the speaker's final decision from social media was salt in the wound. Oh, yeah, the speaker should have consulted Mike Turner to make sure that his decisions would be okay with the uniparty right. Perry issued a blistering statement following his appointment, a move that raised the ire of several committee members. Perry said in part, "I look forward to providing not only a fresh perspective, but conducting actual oversight, not blind obedience to some facets of our intel community." Several House Republicans and Democrats scoffed at the quote, saying it betrays a complete lack of understanding of the gravity of the issues Perry will be facing. So now we've had multiple lacks of understanding betrayed. The first one was the betrayal of a lack of understanding about or respect for their work. And the second one, just about 4 sentences later, is Perry's quote that betrays a complete lack of understanding of the gravity of the issues Perry will be facing. Everybody knows those MAGA people aren't smart enough for jobs like this. Jackson, of course, has his own colorful history. Trump nominated Jackson to be Veterans Affairs Secretary. Jackson withdrew after a slew of stories accusing him of drinking on the job and inappropriately treating employees came out. Jackson denied all allegations, but a scathing Pentagon Inspector General report resurfaced many of the accusations. You see that? And them being resurfaced by a report is almost the same thing as them being true. Perry and Jackson are both problems, you see? We'll hear about the VA, by the way, a little later on. I look forward to bringing my experience in the military and as a doctor to the committee so that I can be an asset for this incredible team led by Chairman Mike Turner, Jackson said in a statement. Johnson told fellow Republican lawmakers and aides that he made the appointments at the behest of Trump, who wanted Jackson and Perry on the panel. Johnson, though, had plenty of other options to choose from here. And so the uniparty's media needs to let us know that there were these other choices that were better, and they should all demand that Jackson and Perry be replaced with some of these other people. Representatives Tony Gonzalez of Texas, Stephanie Bice of Oklahoma, and Laurel Lee of Florida were among the dozens of Republicans who either expressed interest or were considered by the leadership for the job. Gonzalez made a play for the committee under former Speaker Kevin McCarthy and remains interested in serving on the panel, according to sources in leadership. Gonzalez was a Navy cryptologist and came to Congress to work on cyber issues. Bice is a well-liked, well-respected member of the leadership. Lee is a former judge and member of the House Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee is typically represented on Intel. Not a single Republican on the committee also serves on Judiciary. And thanks, Jake Sherman, for showing us where one of the big holes is. The Uniparty that has controlled Congress for decades likes to put someone from the Intel Committee on the Judiciary Committee so that the Judiciary Committee can be influenced by secret information that just can't be shared with them. I wonder who that secretive committee is communicating with. It's the intel agencies, of course, but you have to wonder who they're working with. I mean, I get that the American people are too stupid and have loud mouths and can't actually hear about what's going on in the world and try to weigh in on the decisions their country makes for themselves, even though that's the entire point of our country, of a government of by and for the people. But you would think that the House Judiciary Committee could at least get the secret information, couldn't they? Oh, no, of course, that's too many people to give the secrets to. You increase the chances that one of those secrets might end up being told to the wrong people, like the American people, for instance, who would no longer empower their government to do the things it was doing if they actually knew what their government knew. Not the story the government tells them, but what the government actually knew. Breaking up judiciary and intel is very interesting. Maybe we'll see some effect from that. Maybe there will be some issue where it is clear that that separation made a difference. And we shall see whether or not Jackson and Perry are able to thwart anything that the Intel Committee might have otherwise been involved in. I'm not sure if this makes much difference for hearings. And it certainly makes no difference whatsoever for legislating, not that any of them are doing that, and certainly not on behalf of the American people. But I suppose it's possible that could play into scenarios in that post-election period before the next Congress, assuming elections happens, is sworn in at the beginning of next year. There's also, of course, the possibility that the narrative run-ups to various false flag events might include leaks coming from the House Intelligence Committee that will then be reported as real news, stuff the House Intelligence Committee knows but can't tell the American people. The public would believe those claims are true, and then when the false flag event happens in the real world, or is said to have happened in the real world, people will have already expected it, think that their government knew in advance and has therefore prepared and should be deferred to in every response. Now, all of this is speculation, of course, but Mike Johnson didn't just do this by accident. It's for a reason, and that reason may well present itself to us in the future. Let's finish off this Punch Bowl article. Unlike other committees, the decision here was Johnson's and Johnson's alone. Perry and Jackson's appointment doesn't need to be ratified by the House Republican Steering Committee or the House Republican Conference. The Intelligence Committee was the scene of hyperpartisan struggles during Trump's presidency. Former GOP Chair Devin Nunes used the panel to fight accusations that Trump covertly sought Russian help during the 2016 election. Nunes, now chief executive of Trump's social media company Truth Social, was eventually awarded the Medal of Freedom by Trump. Then Democrats used the Intelligence Committee, chaired by Adam Schiff at that point, to help oversee the 2019 impeachment inquiry on Trump. The panel even went as far as obtaining Nunes's phone records, which infuriated Republicans. After Republicans took over the House in 2022, McCarthy barred Schiff and Eric Swalwell from the panel. Turner and top Intel Democrat Jim Hines of Connecticut have worked to restore the bipartisan comedy within the panel as the United States faces new threats worldwide. Now comes Perry and Jackson's appointments, which could undo that effort. Oh no. The House Intel Committee is going to lose its unipartisan comedy. I wonder what it says about our nation that it is commonplace for everyone just to prefer that everyone get along all the time. No conflict whatsoever. That we prefer that over doing what's right. And because we are so personally committed to that for ourselves, that we transfer the same rationale to our government that we want the two political parties to get along and prioritize their ability to work together on a secretive panel. I hope Scott Perry and Ronnie Jackson make every other member of that panel quit. The New York Times provided more of the central narrative in an article with the headline, Johnson names hard-right Trump allies to intelligence panel, prompting concerns. And we're not going to go through the whole thing. Let's start here. The panel has historically operated in a bipartisan manner and is largely composed of serious-minded lawmakers rather than strident partisans. Oh, the real committed uniparty supporters, the best the uniparty left and the uniparty right have to offer. Those are the serious-minded lawmakers, not these strident partisans who are all consumed with working for the people they represent and not serving the uniparty. And you can see the language manipulation here. This is the common tactic. Serious-minded lawmakers are put in opposition to strident partisans. And of course, everybody knows that MAGA extremists are strident partisans. Therefore, MAGA extremists are not and cannot be serious-minded lawmakers. The mainstream media is essentially always 2 steps away from saying something awful about Trump and his supporters. Let's continue. The break with tradition prompted fears that the intelligence community might pull back on the sensitive national security information it shares with Congress. How about that? Joe Biden, the fake and illegitimate president, and his ridiculous, fake, illegitimate, incompetent administration. None of them seem to have information ever. And I'm certainly not claiming the Congress does seem that way at this point. But now we are being told that the intelligence community will no longer provide up-to-date information on national security concerns to the House Intel Committee if 2 ostensibly duly elected and duly appointed Republican representatives are added to the panel. Like, well, we just can't tell you things anymore because those guys are on it and they might tell Donald Trump. I mean, Trump got them appointed. They are there to implement on the Intel Committee the MAGA agenda. Are we supposed to pretend that the other politicians on that committee don't have an agenda? They don't have political priorities? Oh, of course they don't, right? It's the serious-minded lawmakers. They're working in a unipartisan fashion because we can all trust them to do what's best for the country. That's what people do once they're on the national security panels. That's why our nation is so strong and so secure. And the military is only ever used to do things that the American people would support. I mean, that's how things are in the world, right? That's what we get from unipartisan control of important secretive committees. We can't tell these guys our secrets because they might tell Donald Trump. Donald Trump might tell the American people, and then the American people are going to stop us from doing all the things we planned on doing. They admit to us all the time that they are actively opposing us in every way imaginable. Their interests are entirely in conflict with our interests. And nonetheless, the American people continue to give these people the benefit of the doubt. They say things like, we have to support our government. These are our representatives. They were elected. Even if we disagree with them, the people have the option to vote them out. We just got to vote harder. No, that's not it. That can't be it. They are telling you that the intel community is operating in ways that the American people would never allow them to. And by the way, you could find uniparty communists and globalists who will tell you that that's how it has to be, because otherwise we're going to mess up their world order, and they've got everything sorted out so well. Back to the paper of record. The appointments also sparked outrage from Democrats and mainstream Republicans, given the ethical and legal issues in which both men have been embroiled. Punchbowl News reported on Thursday that Mr. Johnson made the appointments at the behest of Trump. A spokesman for Mr. Johnson said the speaker had the, quote, utmost confidence in Congressman Perry and Jackson to capably serve the American people on the Intelligence Committee, end quote. Former Representative Adam Kinzinger, Republican of Illinois and former Air Force pilot, called the move, quote unquote, insane. Representative Mikey Sherrill, Democrat of New Jersey and a former Navy helicopter pilot, wrote on social media that Mr. Johnson was putting his MAGA agenda ahead of our national security at Donald Trump's direction. And by the way, Mikey Sherrill was that New Jersey congresswoman who a few weeks ago, after Donald Trump held a rally in Wildwood, said, Donald Trump, you're not welcome in New Jersey. Because in the Garden State, we believe in democracy. We know that diversity is our strength, and we let women make their own health care decisions. Do us all a favor and go back to court. And not too long after Sherrill tweeted that, Laura Loomer came out and said over the last 9 months, Mikey Sherrill has paid Judge Merchan's daughter's company, Authentic Campaigns, over $216,793. This is another example of yet another conflict of interest and another reason why Judge Merchan should recuse himself from President Trump's trial in New York City. This is who the New York Times believes presents valuable commentary on this very serious issue. She added, I have serious concerns about Representatives Perry and Jackson serving on the Intel Committee, considering their efforts to overturn free and fair elections, incite an insurrection, and their reckless actions on the job. They'll weaponize the Intel Committee to support Trump's agenda. Well, wait a second. Is she saying that the House Intel Committee could be weaponized? Right now, it's unipartisan, but later it won't be if those guys are added, because if those guys are added, they're going to weaponize the Intel Committee on behalf of Donald Trump, not against Donald Trump. And you see, that's the wrong direction to weaponize the House Intel Committee, which is a very serious committee of serious-minded lawmakers trying to work in a unipartisan fashion and exhibit comedy with their peers from the other party. The Times then gives the backstory on Perry about how he was an election denier. He didn't believe that Joe Biden received 81 million real lawful American votes. He shares that in common with every other honest and informed individual across our society. And they also try to frame him as an insurrectionist as well. In a statement, Perry thanked Mr. Johnson for selecting him for the panel and promised he would serve as a check on the intelligence community. I look forward to providing not only a fresh perspective, but conducting some actual oversight, not blind obedience to some facets of our intel community that all too often abuse their powers, resources, and authority to spy on the American people, Mr. Perry said. It's strange that Jake Sherman didn't give us the rest of that quote. That is some rather outrageous journalistic malpractice. He cut off this sentence after the word community, Jake Sherman did. Not blind obedience to some facets of our intel community. That's where Sherman stops. Our intel community that all too often abuse their powers, resources, and authority to spy on the American people. You talk about regime and uniparty shills. This is what it looks like. I'm amazed that the New York Times isn't the absolute worst in this case. It's kind of incredible. Skipping down. Mr. Jackson has quietly lobbied for the position on the Intelligence Committee for years. He voted in favor of reauthorizing key provisions of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, a stance favored by members of the panel but fiercely opposed by many on the far right, including Mr. Perry. Far too many bad actors around the world want to see America's national security and status on the world stage destroyed. And it is critical that our intelligence community counters these efforts and keeps our country safe, Mr. Jackson said in a statement. Working alongside Chairman Turner, I believe we will be able to restore the American people's complete faith in our intelligence community. Well, I highly doubt that, but maybe you'll be able to prevent them from destroying something else over the course of the next 7 months. Mr. Perry and Mr. Jackson will replace former Representatives Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin and Chris Stewart of Utah, both mainstream Republican lawmakers who joined a wave of resignations from Congress during a uniquely chaotic and unproductive session. Oh, is that because they're all illegitimate and so is the president? Yeah, of course that's the reason. They should have been even less productive than they were. The Times article mentions how serious and bipartisan the panel is and ended this way. Given the new appointment, some on the panel expressed concern privately on Thursday that officials in the intelligence community would narrow the scope of sensitive information they share with the Congress in the future. So the intelligence community believes it's justified in withholding information from the representatives of the American people, the Article 1 branch of our government in the Constitution, the people's representatives. They are the most important because they are closest to the people. They are the most directly accountable to the people. That is why they are the Article 1 branch. And the intel community believes that it can essentially dictate who's allowed to be a member of that committee and who isn't by threatening to withhold necessary information. I mean, you have to think that it's necessary. Why would there be a secretive committee to deal with the intel community if the information the intel community was delivering wasn't necessary for the representatives to have? But now they've thrown a tantrum and they're going to withhold information that the Congress needs to help make decisions to keep the country safe because they're mad about who's on the committee. They don't care that committee members are totally compromised, like Eric Swalwell, who had a relationship with a Chinese spy who was working in his office, or Adam Schiff, who is almost certainly committed treason. That's all good. We just don't want to deal with any MAGA extremists because MAGA extremists aren't there to help the Uniparty advance his agenda. Whereas Uniparty left and Uniparty right representatives, of course, are. It's not just a two-tiered system of justice. It's a two-tiered system of everything because the evil twin tier controls everything, or at least they did. All right. So Mike Johnson has taken a lot of heat for the duration of his speakership. He was billed as a rock-solid Christian conservative, a true MAGA warrior. He had the support of Donald Trump. He was voted into his position as speaker by all of the Republicans in the House. And then he proceeded to disappoint virtually everyone. Through the passage of various spending bills, it was going to be an omnibus, then it was 2 minibuses, extension, and then Mike Johnson finally achieved full approval of his package, except they had to take out the immigration reforms that the Uniparty wanted. But he got them all the funding for their fake foreign proxy wars and their Australian submarine bases and their Jewish space lasers. And sure, you're welcome to think that all of that is a conspiracy theory, but legitimately, Mike Johnson's package contained the Iron Beam, an Israeli directed energy weapon, which of course is used only for defense. And it defends them really, really well, except against paragliding go-karts, which can evade virtually any defense that has ever been conceived of. Israel had the most secure border in all of human history and an absolutely unbelievable fighting force. But paragliding go-karts happen to be their Achilles heel, just as they are for everyone else. It would basically be like if rock beat both paper and scissors. You'd think, why doesn't everyone just choose rock? I agree. Why doesn't everyone try that same thing with paragliding go-karts? It has to work every time. They even knew it was coming and it still worked. That's how unbeatable the paragliding go-karts are. 96 bulls, step aside. Paragliding go-karts every time. But Mike Johnson made everybody very, very angry. Mike Johnson, not a true conservative. Mike Johnson, not true MAGA. Mike Johnson, the border thing is his fault. Here we are trying to get more surveillance on that border that we will then turn inward on the American people. And we need more funding, more officers. We need it to process all these new incoming laborers who are escaping gang violence or climate change or maybe some UN-linked NGO convinced them it was going to be a really good idea and there was at least a 20% chance they wouldn't be raped or murdered. Fox News told us it was an invasion. Chip Roy showed everyone his goatee again and told everyone about how strong a conservative he is. And then you have Mike Johnson just sitting around with his package in his hand, and no one will say they approve of it, no matter how big or small it is. Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to kick him out of the Congress, and Thomas Massie, that old Ron DeSantis supporter, he tried to help. Now, maybe all of that is kayfabe, or maybe they're just not very read in on what's happening and can't figure anything out for themselves. Maybe they believe what happens in the Congress this year really matters. Oh, they were going to exercise so much leverage and get some legislation passed that was going to help the American people. Or maybe there's something else going on, and I happen to think that there is. What's a bigger deal? Allowing a uniparty spending bill to be passed, knowing that the global regime and its bankers are going to print a bunch of worthless fiat currency and distribute it to a bunch of their friends along a timeline very likely too delayed to matter, particularly as that currency loses its value and the gravy train dries up? Or might it be better to have two strong Trump allies on the House Intel Committee, knowing that the Speaker of the House position right now is virtually irrelevant? Unless the presidency and vice presidency are vacated or deemed illegitimate and somehow the House of Representatives still has legitimacy, which I don't believe it does. Unless that's the scenario, who the Speaker of the House is for the next 7 months really shouldn't matter at all. Maybe it will in that expected post-election period between November 6th and the end of the year. But otherwise, I don't see it. In a normal scenario, spending on foreign proxy wars would absolutely be grounds for dismissal. But we aren't in normal times. More is happening in what's not being said and not being reported than what is. I would argue that it's the things Mike Johnson does that make you hate him that allow him also to do the things that the regime hates. And I think you could make the same case for McCarthy and Barr and Pence. And I'm sure there's a great many others. And this isn't some new phenomenon. Donald Trump plays with this dynamic all the time, particularly in his communications. He says all sorts of things that are going to make his base upset, because that's what allows him to come across as a straight shooter to people he's trying to bring into the fold. We talked about this a bit, maybe on Monday, the response to the controlled opposition dynamic. You incorporate a point or points from one of the sides or multiple sides from the central narrative, and then you go beyond that. If you are regularly described as some kind of extremist, as Donald Trump always is and his MAGA supporters always are, you start with, okay, yes, I agree with this, and then you move to, but I also think this, and this. So that all those people who are swayed by one point or another within that central narrative bubble can understand that he shares their priorities, but there are points beyond their priorities that need addressing, and he is prepared to address those too. Now, sometimes that happens immediately, as we're going to see in this next clip, but sometimes it plays out over time. Mike Johnson spent weeks being attacked by his own party. They tried to get him removed as speaker, or at least that's the public narrative. And because he's been portrayed as someone who's willing to do business and reach across the aisle, when a story like this drops about how Mike Johnson has potentially compromised the House Intel Committee, it's a lot harder to make that stick. And the dynamic plays out over the course of many weeks or a couple of months. But the point is the optics. What's visible is the give and take. Now, last night, Dr. Phil broadcast an interview with Donald Trump, and it was nearly an hour long. This is a big chunk of the final segment of that interview. And there are a few examples of this communication strategy just right here in this clip. Dr. Phil, for whatever reason, wanted to try to convince Donald Trump that revenge and retribution were not necessary, The way that Trump was going to look best, the thing the country needed the most, was for Donald Trump to come back and just be the better man. Let it all be water under the bridge, not go after any of his enemies, no matter what they've done to Trump or to the country. He's just going to be the bigger man. Dr. Phil tries like 4 or 5 different approaches, and Dr. Phil is suggesting his own narratives. It's going to be Dr. Phil's words in an interview that makes Donald Trump change his mind and transform into the character that's going to do exactly what Dr. Phil knows that Americans need, which is to hold absolutely no one accountable. Now, Dr. Phil has an extended relationship with Oprah. A lot of people believe Oprah's a very bad actor. I could totally get on board with that. People have some very serious concerns that they believe are well evidenced. At the very, very minimum, it's not something you can just dismiss out of hand. Dr. Phil has been in the entertainment industry for a long time. I have no doubt that he knows hundreds or even thousands of extremely corrupt, powerful people. I'm not trying to judge the man or cast aspersions, but certain people who have certain relationships end up in certain bad positions themselves. But whether or not he personally has anything to hide, and I am not saying I know he does, I certainly do not know that. But there may well be people around him or people in his ear who are legitimately panicked about a return of Donald Trump because of what it means for their lives and what they've done with their lives. So he could just be sharing in their panic or arguing on their behalf, or it's possible that he's just presenting all the points that the mainstream media would try to make or has tried to make about Donald Trump, his comments about retribution, and he's giving Donald Trump an opportunity to present the argument against those points. Phil could be channeling some segment of his audience and playing devil's advocate on their behalf. Either way, the effect is the same. Dr. Phil looks kind of foolish in attempt after attempt, and Donald Trump accepts the concern, agrees with the point he's making, uses a soft touch, and then proceeds from that point to make the argument that these people truly are guilty of serious crimes and absolutely must be held accountable. Think about what Trump's base would want to hear, what I'd want to hear, what you'd want to hear. We'd want Trump to say, yeah, we're going to go after them. We think we're fully justified in doing so. We think the American people have our back and support us in that position. And that is what our mandate says we must do on their behalf. We would love that. But would Dr. Phil's audience love that? Dr. Phil's audience is going to see those arguments about revenge, about retribution for the next year, because there are people out there who don't want Donald Trump coming back. And if he does come back, they certainly don't want him holding people accountable. If they have to put up with 4 years of Trump while he's subverted the entire time, they'll do that. But they don't want to start receiving subpoenas about the things their friends did and have to spend the next 10 years of their lives in courtrooms as everything and everyone falls apart around them. There's probably a huge portion of Dr. Phil's audience who has hated Donald Trump at some point in the last 9 years. There's some portion of his audience that watches CNN and MSNBC and reads all of the anti-Trump publications, the mainstream media. They get their information from Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and they still believe that Donald Trump is going to be some kind of authoritarian dictator rounding up his political opponents for crimes he's created, even though they've already seen it happen the other way around. And to be fair, by the way, to Dr. Phil, earlier in the interview, he talked with Trump about the Law and Order New York loudest hush money trial, recognizing and agreeing that it was a rigged trial, rigged against Trump. But Trump is able to successfully present himself to them as the opposite of what the people screaming on television have made him out to be. And once he's disarmed that bomb, he's able to talk directly to those people and say, hey, listen, this is what Hillary Clinton, etc. have done. So keep that in mind as you listen to this. Dr. Phil's going to make 4, 5, 6 attempts. Trump will accept the position, even though it's not his, and then advance beyond it. This clip is about 7 minutes long, by the way, so if you've already heard it and you want to skip ahead, go for it. Otherwise, I think it's very interesting and well worth your time.
Retribution and revenge. Yeah. And let me ask you this before you even respond to that. I want to play what if with you for a minute. What if when you win this election, you said, enough is enough. Too much is too much. This is a race to the bottom, and it stops here. It stops now. They've made a half a dozen or more major attempts to take you off the playing board, and you just said, it stops now. I am going to rise above this cycle of ugly. I'm not going to play this gotcha retribution game. It stops now. I'll forgive. I'll not ever forget, but I am not going to play this retribution game. I am going to put the American people first, not getting my pound of flesh first. You got to do what you got to do, but I'm going to put this country as the shining city on the hill. I am moving forward. I'm not playing the retribution game. It stops with me. It stops here. What if you took that approach?
I'm okay with that. I am. I'm okay with that. Sometimes, I'm sure in certain moments, I wouldn't be. You know, when you go through what I've been through, they spied on my campaign. You know, they spied on my campaign. Remember I announced it? They did things that people don't even talk about. And I got rid of Comey, and I got rid of a lot of people. I got rid of a lot of people. Thousands of people. At the VA, I cleaned it, 9,000 people. They were sadists. I got rid of them. But what they've done is bad. With all of that being said, we have to unite the country, Phil. The country has to be united. This country is a mess.
Every situation needs a hero. What a great opportunity for you to stop this cycle, this vicious cycle of gotcha, gotcha back, gotcha, gotcha back. Every situation needs a hero. What a great opportunity to step up and say, you know what, it stops here, it stops with me.
I think you'll be impressed. We have to unite the country. We have to save the country. That's not really saving the country. There are people that did some bad things. I know who they are and all of that. But as an example, with Hillary Clinton, I'd mention her name. Everyone's screaming. Thousands and thousands. Yeah, we just had 107,000 people show up in New Jersey. You saw that. 25,000 people showed up in the South Bronx.
In the South Bronx.
But we had Wildwood, New Jersey. 107,000 people. It was a record. They've never had that. When I mention the name Hillary previous to the last election, they said, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. But I would be there, and I'm trying to almost quiet them down. They were going crazy. How would it be I win, and I lock Hillary Clinton up? The president's wife, the former president's wife, I locked her up. And how would it be if I took the Secretary of State, she was Secretary of State, and we threw her into a prison someplace? I think it was terrible. And yet now they're trying to do that with me. Think of it. I didn't want to do that. I could have done that pretty easily. She busted up her phones, and she busted up her laptops, and what they did, and they put bleach bit. You know what bleach bit is? It's so expensive nobody uses it because it's an acid and it wipes everything out. Could have done it real easy. Don't forget, she disobeyed a subpoena from the United States Congress, and she broke up all this machinery, all this technology, after she got the subpoena. Think of it. How would it look if I took a president of the United States wife and threw her into a prison? I hated it because I wanted to bring the country together, and I largely did. And I brought it together through success because it was the most successful economy in the history of our country. Okay. Now, the difference is they're trying to do it to me. And maybe you could feel differently about it, but I don't feel differently. Retribution is going to be through success. We're going to make it very successful. We have to bring the country together.
And you can do that. Because let me tell you, this revenge thing there's a lot of research, and Dr. James Kimmel at Yale has done this research and seen neurologically in the brain that there's an addiction to revenge, just like to opioid or whatever. And that even if people commit a crime and they get arrested for it, they see themselves as the victim and they want revenge against the person that arrested them. And then the person that arrested them gets hammered. So now that person says, okay, well, I'm not going to put up with that. So they go back after the criminal. Now the criminal has been victimized again. And so we get into this loop where we're addicted to it back and forth. It's got to stop. And we're better than this. We must be better than this. And you're big enough to do it. Every situation needs a hero. You can stop this. You can say, well, no, I think it ends here. It ends with me.
I think you'll be proud of the job we do. And, the word revenge is a very strong word, but maybe we have revenge through success. But that's what I'd like to see. I want to see the country survive, because this country is not going to survive like this. And really, the expression, I think it's the greatest theme ever in politics, maybe, because it's the biggest movement. We want to make America great again, and that's what we have to do. And I think you'll be very proud of the job we do.
The Pope has a book out that he's written, and he says, "We are all brothers and sisters, and there must be no resentment among us. For any war to truly end, forgiveness is necessary. Otherwise, what will follow is not justice, but revenge." And that's true even in the cultural wars that we're fighting here. I think you have so much to do, you don't have time to get even. You only have time to get right.
Well, revenge does take time, I will say that.
It does.
And sometimes revenge can be justified, Phil. I have to be honest. Sometimes it can.
But is the country better or worse for them going after you?
I think the country is really worse for what they've done, and I think you see that when you look at the poll numbers. When you see that almost $400 million has poured in since this horrible decision was made. That was a few days ago. Numbers that nobody's ever heard of in politics before. It's a great honor. The people of our country get it. They're very smart. Taken as a whole, I have to say, they're very smart. But it's been an honor being with you. It really has. And I think you'll be very proud of the job we do.
Now, I think that was a wonderful series of answers. And that includes, by the way, mentioning that the people he cleaned out of the VA system were sadists. And the fun little hat tips there. 107,000 people in Wildwood, New Jersey. He made sure to repeat that a couple times. And he's letting Dr. Phil's audience know, we actually have the mandate for this. The American people want this. He said it's about saving the country. At one point, Trump answered Dr. Phil's suggestions, saying that's not really saving the country. Now, it's hard to be sure if Trump was referring to what Dr. Phil had just said and was making the point that you can't save the country without holding these people accountable, or if Trump was saying his focus is on saving the country. That stuff is kind of ancillary to saving the country, but it's still something that needs to be taken care of. But Dr. Phil is attacking that point from all angles. Trump won't have the time to hold people accountable. It won't be the best thing for America to hold people accountable. We need to bring the country together. So you can't hold people accountable. The country might become addicted to revenge. So it's just a vicious cycle of revenge. It would look like Donald Trump taking revenge on the people who have been attempting to destroy him for the last 9 years. And then once he goes after all of them, well, then they're going to come back after all of us again. And it's just a never-ending cycle, and that's not a way to produce a stable society. You see, the way to produce a stable society is to let that one side be as abusive as they want for as long as they want, and then when they're finally caught and their power has been diminished to the point where they can be held accountable, well, then you appeal to the stability of the society. Then you appeal to being the bigger man, and they never get held accountable, ever. I wonder if Dr. Phil understands that that could create a vicious cycle as well, a vicious cycle of never-ending corruption, where people know that they will never be held accountable. Every now and then, someone on their side will have to walk the plank, be the sacrificial lamb to show everybody, hey, we got that one. Mistakes were made, but only by that guy. Mistakes were made, but not by us. It was just that one guy. We're going to put him in prison for the rest of his life, and that will serve as punishment for all of us. And then we're going to let that guy out of prison and make sure he has 6 or 7 book deals for the rest of his life and can be on television if he wants to, or maybe we'll give him a board seat at a major corporation. But the people will feel like they achieved some accountability, and that's all they deserve. I mean, if we had actual accountability and people were genuinely harshly punished, well, then no one's going to go along with the agenda, and we can't have that. So what we need to do is create the situation where people can be as abusive as they want for as long as they want and never be held accountable, because when their power is diminished and someone else takes power, that person is required to always be the better man for the good of the country. Now, I honestly hope that Dr. Phil is only playing devil's advocate and giving Donald Trump a chance to refute this entire mindset. But then here is Dr. Phil this morning on CNN with Abby Phillip taking credit for somehow advancing Donald Trump in his thought about this issue, bringing Donald Trump to a more mature and psychologically healthy place.
Going to do if he is elected. Did you get any clarity from him about whether he would try to pursue the people perhaps who pursued him, DAs or his political enemies?
Well, certainly that's a big issue, and I lean very strongly into the position of saying, look, this is not going to help this country. If you get into a position of power and your agenda is one of revenge, retribution, saying, okay, you came after me, so now I'm going to come after you, America picks up the tab for that. That's not anything that's good to do. That's going to take up time. That's just playing tit for tat. So you go after them because they came after you, then they come after you because they go after them. In the meantime, what about America? What about the business of America? What about the issues of education? What about the issues of the border? What about the issues of inflation? What about the issues of healthcare? What about all the things that the people really care about? They're not interested in you playing gotcha with the people that you think got you. We're not interested in that. Nobody's interested in that. And
how did you respond to that when that's your perspective. What do you sense is his inclination? Because just today, he said, for example, that he would indict the January 6th committee members, presumptively the members of Congress who were on that committee investigating what happened on January 6th. Are you more or less convinced after sitting down with him that he actually would follow through on those kinds of pledges?
Well, I actually don't think he will. I think this is a situation that, it's a process. This is something that I think he's had in his mind, that there's only one way to go, and that's to get even. And I think I've really made some headway with him that is not the way to go. I think it's a process. I think he'll turn this over and over in his mind, and I don't think he will do that. And to the extent that I have any opportunity to lean into this with him, I am going to relentlessly try and get him to not do that and to get others to not do that. Look, we need to stop this. This is a time where America needs to come together, not be playing gotcha and going on some kind of revenge tour. We don't need that. We don't have time for that. It's not good for America. We need to unify, not be going after people that we think came after us, whether we think they did so fairly or otherwise.
Yeah, it sounds like
we don't need that. The last thing we need is for Trump to be going after people that he thinks have treated him unfairly.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you are personally taking it upon yourself to talk through this with him. But for the voters who are evaluating this very issue, Donald Trump is explicitly saying, I'm going to prosecute my predecessor, Joe Biden, if I'm elected. He's explicitly saying he wants to go after his political enemies. He will go after the members of Congress who were doing their jobs investigating what happened on January 6th. Don't voters need to weigh that, especially since the argument that Trump is making with no evidence is that Biden is going after him?
Well, I think they absolutely have to weigh that. And if they think that Donald Trump or any other candidate is going to do that, then, and they think that is not what I'm putting somebody in office for, then they absolutely shouldn't vote for them. I don't think that's what we're putting people in office to do. That's running their agenda instead of America's agenda. And we need people to run America's agenda. Look, we've got serious problems, and it takes serious people to deal with those problems. I'm not a political animal. It doesn't matter to me whether somebody's Democrat or Republican. I could care less, don't know enough about politics to talk about it intelligently. But I can tell you this, from a cultural standpoint, we need people working on the problems that are impacting the quality of life in America, impacting the quality of medical care, impacting the quality of education, impacting the quality of people's ability to feed and take care of their families. And that doesn't leave room to be playing gotcha and retribution and revenge. That's not what we need. We need people to get in there and do their jobs. And if not, they shouldn't have the privilege. That's not a legacy, it's a privilege. And we shouldn't be putting people in office that want to play those kind of games.
Now it's up to you to determine whether or not you want to give Dr. Phil the benefit of the doubt. I wouldn't personally, not only because what I believe he's advocating for is morally wrong, but because I don't believe his shtick. This is an op, and I have no reason to believe it's a good one. Why wouldn't Dr. Phil have come on to CNN in the morning and said, yeah, Donald Trump and I had a conversation about that. Donald Trump actually understood my concerns and was very reasonable about everything, but also made a compelling argument about why people need to be held accountable. As you heard in the interview with Trump, Dr. Phil, in the interview with Abby Phillip, just continues repeating himself over and over and over, making the same point again and again, using different language, but sometimes even the same language, asserting that he's gotten through to Donald Trump. He might have even convinced Trump to take it easy despite his worst tendencies. And I try to imagine what it would have been like had Donald Trump just been aggressive in response to Dr. Phil the whole time. Dr. Phil would have appeared on CNN this morning saying the exact same things, except noting that Donald Trump really is dead set on that revenge and retribution mindset. Dr. Phil tried to get through to him, but he just couldn't because Trump is a hardhead. He's an egomaniac. He doesn't really think his decisions through. He's honestly not that smart. That is continuously what we are told the central narrative about Donald Trump is. And we can see over time how that impression has just melted away. That is not how Donald Trump is thought of anymore. He is still portrayed that way by the mainstream media, and every time they do that, they run the risk of whoever's watching their show waking up and understanding, hey, these guys are still lying about Donald Trump. I mean, years ago, it made sense. Okay, I believed it. But they're still trying to pretend that Trump is a dangerous egomaniac? We already had 4 years with Donald Trump as president, and then we've had these other 4 years where Donald Trump is also president, but no one thinks he is. And Trump's not the dangerous one. He's not the authoritarian dictator. He's not the incompetent, buffoonish leader who makes a mockery of America on the world stage. That's Joe Biden. And I didn't intend to segue into this, but it's worth mentioning that yesterday, for the 80-year anniversary of D-Day, Joe Biden was over in France. He brought Dr. Jill along with him, and he met up with Manny Mac, old Emmanuel Macron, who brought his husband and or wife along with him. At one point, the fake president nearly doubled over. Jill Biden put her hand over her mouth. Biden held himself in some kind of old man half squatting position. We are told that he was searching for a chair. He was trying to sit down, but it looked to all the world like he crapped his pants. There is some confusion as to whether or not that's true, but no one really cares because either way, Joe Biden is such an embarrassment. Dr. Jill actually had to walk Joe quickly out of the ceremony. There are some indications that that was planned because Joe holds people up due to how slowly he moves. But there are also people that believed that Jill had to walk Joe Biden out because he had a full diaper. You all remember when Joe Biden let us know. And he was reportedly put into a different suit for the rest of the day. Now, I don't report on the bathroom schedule of old Shitty, the fake president. But it is undeniable that this man is an embarrassment on the world stage. Donald Trump actually made a little fun of that moment during his speech yesterday before an event for Turning Point USA in Arizona. Biden isn't only an embarrassment on the world stage. It is clear to the public now that he is the beneficiary of a two-tiered system here at home. The general public at large, if they follow politics at all, understands that Robert Hur, the special counsel, chose not to pursue any indictments of Joe Biden on the basis that he was a demented old man, the report stating clearly it would be difficult to convince a jury that they should convict him, by then a former president well into his 80s, of a serious felony that requires a mental state of willfulness. And there was some controversy around that because It seems like the general public, at least that's my impression, does not accept old age as a justification for forgiving a career of political criminality and corruption. Much of it easily available in evidence in the Marco Polo report on the Biden laptop. You can find that, by the way, at here'shunter.com. One of the big stories this week was that the Hunter Biden laptop was confirmed by the FBI as real and true, as if that was some kind of mystery. Apparently, people out there were still holding out hope that it might prove to be false. Ashley Biden had already admitted to her diary being real, but there was some question about Hunter Biden's laptop. That laptop has been in the possession of the FBI for nearly 5 years now. The American people know the Biden family has been involved in a web of criminality that spans decades. The feckless and illegitimate congressional committees are sending the fake and illegitimate DOJ referrals for prosecution for Hunter Biden and James Biden. So that op is finally working its way up to Joe. But people by and large are not opposed to politicians being held accountable for corruption and criminality in office when they are supposed to be serving the American people. And at some point, we have to reject this idea that government has some important work to do. There is virtually no important work our government needs to do. It shouldn't be doing any of the work it's doing already. And we can see that it actually works better when they do nothing. The American people are not clamoring for more legislation and more rules to be passed, more deep state bureaucratic administrations and agencies coming up with more rules and regulations that systematically violate our constitutional rights and make our lives more difficult. There is a possible future still in play where we find out we have essentially had no federal government for the last 4 years. And if that's the case, the American public, the vast majority, would have never had any idea. And if you can't tell whether or not something is even there, you certainly can't make a justification for the necessity that that thing be there. But if we are to believe Dr. Phil, if he's not just playing devil's advocate and giving Trump an opportunity to refute all of these concerns, if he's actually backing that position, that Donald Trump should not seek accountability for any of these people who have broken the law, who've committed crimes against America, crimes against humanity, people who have abused the power of government and our justice system to enrich themselves or increase their power, or through corruption helped out some network of friends or allies or associates advancing some anti-American cause, then why do we need any justice system at all? Why would we hold anyone accountable for crimes if we weren't going to hold the most powerful people accountable for crimes? The most powerful people who abused a public mandate and power that was given to them on behalf of the public, on behalf of the people. They are tasked with a very important job, with very specific responsibilities, with fiduciary duties. They swear oaths to protect and defend the Constitution, or at least they're supposed to. And then they use that public trust to enrich themselves and make themselves more powerful. If we're not going to hold those people accountable and we're not going to prosecute those people for their crimes, what is the justification for prosecuting anyone? If you're going to make arguments like, well, the government just doesn't have time to go after these people, well, then why do they have time to go after single mothers who missed a payment on their taxes? Why do they have time to go pursue people for participating in a First Amendment protected peaceful political protest on January 6, 2021? Why do they have time for that? And why isn't Dr. Phil worried about some kind of revenge cycle for citizens like that? Dr. Phil is actually arguing for a two-tiered system of justice. He is only arguing that the wealthiest and most powerful people aren't held accountable because somehow that's bad for the country. No, that's not bad for the country. That is the thing the country needs above all else. We're all adults here. We can do this according to the rules. We can even do this according to the rules they write. And that's something I've discussed on this podcast for a long time. Draw the lines on the field. Let's go play the game. You make up the rules. You draw the lines on the field. Just tell us how everything is going to be, what the system is, and then we will beat you within that system. Well, there was a segment at the end of one of the Other big interviews of this week, Tucker Carlson's interview of El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, where he essentially says that exact thing. This is a great clip, about 4 minutes long.
To win. And then when we won, since we even didn't have simultaneous parliamentary elections, we actually went to the executive branch, totally opposed to the legislative branch and the judicial branch. So they control the Supreme Court, and they control 90% of the legislative body. So I had to veto everything, and they override my vetoes, and they approved over 70 laws that I veto. Yes, and everything that we do, Supreme Court, is unconstitutional. Yeah. So we went to the people and said, we cannot work like this. We need a majority in Congress. We need a huge majority in Congress because we not only need to approve laws, we need to get all these people out. And the only way to get it out democratically and respecting the rules of the system is that we get a huge, immense majority in Congress, right? Because Congress can fire anybody, even the president.
Yes.
So people gave us the huge majority. And it was hard because they still control the Electoral Tribunal as of today. That's why our election was recognized by all the countries in the world, because they know the Electoral Tribunal is controlled by the opposition. Still.
It's the only thing that's controlled.
It's the only thing. And we have liberalized that, so that validates and legitimizes everything else. So but the thing is that in 2021, when we went to congressional elections, we carried a supermajority that they said it was impossible because the system was designed so you cannot get a supermajority. But we got it with more than that. And then with that supermajority, there's an article in the Constitution that allows the supermajority in Congress to fire the Supreme Court justices. So our party fired the Supreme Court justices when they got the majority. They fired the Attorney General, which in the States, the president appoints the Attorney General. Here is Congress. Congress elects the Attorney General, Congress fires the Attorney General. But you need 2/3 of Congress to fire an Attorney General. So we got 75% of Congress.
But you stayed within the rules the whole time.
We have never not respected a single rule. That's also a narrative that they want to, but they cannot point out a single thing that was done by not respecting the rules that were written by them. Because the rules are written by people. It's not like, these rules were, these rules are not given by God. These rules were written by people. But still, we respected all the rules that were written by them. And yeah, we got I just saw an interview that the president of Costa Rica gave in Costa Rica, because he came also, like many other world leaders, he came to the inauguration. So they asked him over there in Costa Rica, and they said, but don't you think that Bukele is like doing things that are not within the constitutional limits that he has? And this interview was today, earlier, and President of Costa Rica said, well, in a soccer game or in a football game, you have the rules and you have the score, right? And the rules are made so the score, will be like that. But sometimes you get a super score in one side, right? So are you angry at the rules or are you angry at the score? Because the president of El Salvador, the only thing he can be criticized for is to getting a huge score in his favor with the rules of the game that they lay out for him.
And that right there is the point we're reaching. If we had a legitimate census, if we had legitimate polls, if we had legitimate elections, the country would have no confusion over this. We would see vast majorities and the public mandate to do absolutely everything that needs to be done, including holding all of these people accountable. It is not heroic to refuse to hold the rich and powerful accountable, to look like you are being the bigger man. That is you participating in that same two-tiered system of justice, a one-tiered system of justice where no one is actually above the law, requires this type of retribution. I'll be back on Monday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening to this episode for free, you can support me and support the show and the work I do by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can do so for as low as $50 a year or $5 a month. Comes out to under $0.25 per episode, and you'll blast right through the paywall for all of the writing. The merch store is www.cancelcouture.com, and you can find everything else by heading to Linktree, linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon out on the range. It's hell!